In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about why and how can fast walking be so good for lower back pain. It's one of the therapies I use. It's one of the therapies that comes from Dr. McGill to be able to help people overcome their lower back pain. And what we're going to be talking about in this tutorial, we're going to go through some of the anatomy, and we're going to intertwine that with why this anatomy is so good for lower back pain and helping people overcome it. If you are struggling with lower back pain, if you've watched any of my tutorials before, you'll know that I have an online consultation and coaching for people that want to overcome their lower back pain. So if you want to find out more about that, just click the link below. We're going to be mainly talking about this tissue, which is called the myofascia. Now, what we're talking about, as you can see here, myofascia is a tissue that goes throughout the body. It's a bit like, as you can see on this diagram, it's a suit that you pull down here and it affects sort of up in the abdomen, or it'll affect down in the ankle, or you can pull here as they're doing here and it'll affect across the chest down into the abdomen, possibly down into the knee as well. So it's a tissue that goes throughout the body is the point that I'm trying to make. Now, what happens is as one is walking, so you go through this gait cycle as I've got here. Now this is a picture that you're going to see all the way through. But basically the entire body prepares, or the entire myofascia prepares to receive the weight of the body and the ground reaction force. So faster walking encourages the T-spine to move, the arms to move, and obviously the legs to move. It engages the core more. So we're talking about an entire body movement, and this brings the myofascia online a lot more, and we're going to talk about why and the particular parts of it that come online and how it's going to help people in their lower back pain. But essentially all we have to understand first is it's a whole body exercise and the myofascia is coming online. And what we've got here is an exchange between the front and back lines as the hip flexes and extends. So what does this mean? This basically means, so as you can see here, you've got the sort of a functional line across the back here, and you've got a functional line across, a functional line across the back, and a functional line going through the front of the body as well. So this deals with hip flexion, this deals with hip extension. So you can see here as the leg comes sort of forward, or as is swung forward, it's this front line, and as the foot hits the floor and comes backwards over these three stages, it then moves to this line on the back. Now what this is doing, this is as it's exchanging the activation of these two lines, what it's also doing is exchanging the load between the two. So when we're fast walking, not only are we engaging the muscles more, as I've talked about, we're engaging more of the fascia, but we're also exchanging the load between the front and the back of the body. So what it's not doing is it's not concentrating in one area. When we slow walk and we aren't engaging as many muscles, we aren't engaging the arms and the upper back and so on and so forth, we're sending load to similar areas of the body, and that's where the pressure can be caused. So with regards to this, there's an exchange between front and back lines as the hip flexes and extends, and that is exchanging load between the two as well. Lines on the side of the body as well, so as you can see here, lines going right up the side of the body, they are providing a stability. So they're keeping the hips aligned, the shoulders aligned, and which is essentially keeping the spine stable. So all the way through that movement, because we are moving a lot more from hip flexion and hip extension, and then you've also got shoulder flexion and extension. What we're doing here is obviously we're changing the load between the front and the back, but we're also gaining stability through either side of the body, which is allowing then again stresses to be dispersed around the body. So we're not taking knees out of alignment, hips out of alignment, spine out of alignment, so on and so forth. Again, when we're slower walking, there's more chance of that happening, knees collapsing, feet collapsing, so on and so forth. When we're faster walking, this is all staying much more in line because more tissues are engaged, and essentially the body is in a much more efficient and effective posture position, which is then causing the movement to both again be more efficient and effective. As I've introduced as well, we get a thoracic rotation. So this is, as you can see on this diagram here, where we get an exchange between, and not only an exchange, but also a sort of a counterbalancing of shoulders. So you've got shoulder forward here, opposite shoulder, opposite leg forward. You've got leg back here and the opposite shoulder back here. So this sort of this counter rotation, which is causing momentum, which again is bringing more fascia online. This exchange is happening a lot more efficiently because this thoracic rotation helps the leg swing because there's momentum. Because what we've got is an exchange between this extended shoulder, as it were, and this extended hip, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in the next slide. But essentially what we're getting is when this leg sort of from here lifts off and swings forward, and we get that counter rotation from the shoulders, we're now starting to use our body a bit more like an elastic band. So it's very much, we are walking with a spring in our step, quite literally. So you've probably heard that saying before, but quite literally we are walking with a spring in our step. And this is where the spine becomes stabilized a lot more, because when the hips and the shoulders are doing this, the spine is stabilized, more tissues are online, more muscles are working, more fascia are working, load is being dispersed around the body, and walking is a lot more of a therapy to the body because of the momentum that's being used. And this slide sort of completes what I was talking about, but what we get is the opposite hip and shoulder as I've described. So this shoulder here and this hip, so there is an extension of that elastic band here. So that elastic band is being stretched from this left shoulder to the right hip down here. So the left shoulder here to the right hip here. So he's got that extended elastic band. And then what's happening as the leg comes through, the elastic band is being shortened. And then as the leg comes back, it's being primed again. So again, we are, as it says here, come together and apart, winding and unwinding the torso. So we're using the torso to prime these elastic bands, which is the fascial line on the front and on the back. And we're priming these elastic bands to propel us forward, again, as I mentioned in the last slide, which is literally putting a spring in our step. So what we're starting to do is spring forward, more tissues coming online. This spring also manages the load going through tissues and the load going through joints, because again, it will disperse it throughout and around the body, to the front, to the back, to the left, to the right, to the inside, to the outside, to the top, to the bottom. So it will disperse all these loads. Rather than with slow walking, it's going to be concentrating in certain areas. Now, what I'm talking about here is more about the posture of walking. There is another element with regards to the frequency, the intensity, the duration of the walking as well. That also plays a part. But for now, we're just talking about the posture and the position that you're in, and how we can access more of the tissues to make our walking more of a therapy rather than a hindrance for our lower back pain. So finally, to quickly summarize what we talked about, number one, faster walking unloads tissues of the spine and uses less energy, so you also reduce fatigue. That's another important part to it, because muscles can become fatigued, and then that can cause other muscles to become fatigued and compensate, and then so on and so forth, and then you get problems in the lower back. So we're unloading tissues and stabilizing the spine. The second thing, your body becomes a set of elastic bands. So that those fascial lines that I was talking about are essentially the elastic bands. Now, they literally put a spring in your step, as I've talked about. And what this is doing is it stabilizes the spine, because the pelvis, the lumbar spine, the thoracic spine are working together. So these are the three main reasons we need to use faster walking. Now, as I mentioned in the last slide, there are other aspects to it, and that is the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of the walking as well. So it's important to understand that it's not just the posture. Thank you for watching this video. If you've liked it, hit the like button. If you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions about what I've talked about, ask a question down in the comment section below, and I'll look forward to answering it.